The crowd laughed when the UFC champion mocked Chuck Norris, but the smile didn't last long. It was one of those nights when the arena felt less like a sporting venue and more like a cathedral of noise. Lights burned hot from above, beams slicing through the dark, bouncing off the canvas and the cage. The air vibrated with the restless energy of thousands packed shoulder to shoulder, each person clutching a beer, a phone, or a flag. A pay-per-view showcase. Loud music, flashing screens, the rhythm of showmanship that modern fighting fed on. In the center of it stood the champion. Young, carved from hours in the gym, still slick with sweat from a training demo he'd just performed. His jawline glistened under the lights, and his grin had the cockiness of someone who knew the cameras loved him. He leaned into the mic, his voice booming through the speakers. "Come on, don't tell me you're still buying into those karate movies." Chuck Norris wouldn't last a minute in here. The laugh that followed wasn't nervous. It was calculated, dragged out, designed to sting. He turned slowly in a circle, gesturing to the crowd like a conductor. "Movies aren't fights. This is reality. Out here, he's nothing but a meme." The reaction split the building in two. One section roared with laughter, clapping, and whistling, feeding on the bravado. Another section booed loud enough to rattle the cage. The sound collided in the middle, rising and folding back on itself, leaving a weird pressure in the chest of anyone listening. The cameras knew where to turn next. On the edge of the arena floor, tucked just far enough back to avoid the spotlight, sat Chuck Norris. Simple clothes. No entourage. No microphone in his hand. No smirk on his face. His posture wasn't slouched, but it wasn't squared either. He looked more like a man who had wandered in to watch than someone expecting to be dragged into the show. When the cameras hit him, his expression didn't change. He didn't blink. His jaw was set in stillness, eyes fixed forward, not on the crowd, not even on the champion, on the moment itself, as if measuring its weight. That restraint contrasted so sharply with the champion's grinning arrogance that people in the seats felt the divide in their stomachs. The champion smirked harder, sensing both laughter and booze as fuel. "See? He won't even look me in the eye. You know why? Because in here, the old man's nothing. You can't choreograph your way out of this cage." He tapped the chain link wall, knuckles ringing. "This is where real fighters live." The words landed heavy, too heavy. People leaned forward. Some shook their heads. Some lifted their phones higher, eager to catch Norris's reaction. In the corners of the arena, chants began to bubble, low at first, scattered, but rising as more voices caught on. "Chuck! Chuck! Chuck!" The chant rolled across sections like thunder crawling across a valley. At first, the champion laughed along, pretending it was part of his joke, but the sound didn't die. It grew. Even people who hadn't come to see him were drawn into the rhythm of it, pounding on the railings, stomping the concrete under their seats. The energy turned sharp, like the building itself wanted something to happen. The cameras cut back to Chuck. He still hadn't moved. He hadn't smiled or frowned. But the chanting swelled around him until it no longer felt like a request. It felt like a demand. Phones lifted everywhere. Some faces grinned, hoping to watch him fail. Others carried quiet awe, remembering the man who once symbolized a different era of toughness. And in that balance, youth and arrogance on one side, stillness and legacy on the other, the arena found itself holding its breath. The champion raised his mic again, a vein rising in his neck, pretending he was the one in control. "What do you say, Chuck?" His voice sharpened. "You want to show these people what an action star looks like when the cameras aren't here to save him?" The crowd erupted. Laughter, boos, cheers, whistles, all smashing into each other. The sound had no shape anymore, just force. Some fans grinned wildly, chanting for blood. Others had gone quiet, sensing something more dangerous underneath. Even the commentators, voices fed straight to millions of viewers at home, hesitated, searching for words that didn't exist. And through it all, Norris sat. His stillness was louder than anything the champion had said. That was when the chant returned, heavier, unified now. "Chuck! Chuck! Chuck!" It wasn't playful anymore. It was pressure, the kind that bends nights into history. People leaned forward in their seats, eyes fixed on the man who hadn't spoken, who hadn't flinched, who hadn't given the champion the satisfaction of even a glare. The tension pressed against the walls. Something had to break. And as the noise surged to its peak, The cameras found Norris again, the spotlight circling until it landed on him full. The champion grinned, expecting another joke. The audience leaned in. Norris slowly raised his eyes from the floor and locked them on the cage. His expression didn't change, but the stillness was gone. There was weight now, coiled like a spring. The building roared so loudly the lights seemed to shake. The night had shifted, and it was no longer the champion holding the crowd. Just wondering, where are you watching from? Write it down, Bello. The champion didn't wait for silence. He raised the mic, swagger in every line of his body, and his voice rolled through the speakers. Your movies are make-believe, old man. Let's see what happens when a real fighter steps in here. He dragged the mic head across the fence, the screech making people wince. Laughter bubbled up again, cruel and expectant. All eyes shifted back to Chuck Norris. Still seated, he looked like stone, not carved but weathered, the kind that outlasts wind and water. He hadn't moved, not a flinch, not a smirk. The contrast between the champion's restless showmanship and that stillness filled the air with static. The crowd fed on it, chants rising, splintering, then merging into one pounding rhythm. Chuck, Chuck, Chuck. The sound wasn't just noise now, it was demand. The cameras hovered on Norris as if waiting for the earth itself to tilt. And then it did. He stood. There was no grand gesture. He rose slow, deliberate, as if unrolling time. It was a small act, yet the effect was seismic. Conversations choked mid-sentence, the laughter died. People craned their necks, phones went higher. Security glanced at each other, unsure if they were supposed to step in or stand down. He didn't look left or right. He walked toward the cage like a man walking to a door he had been through many times before. The aisle cleared without orders, shoulders pressed back, chairs scraped. A teenager in a replica hoodie froze with his phone half raised, too overwhelmed to record. When Norris passed, the boy whispered something no one could hear. At the cage door, an official hesitated. A hand twitched toward Norris's chest, then dropped. The referee inside shifted uncomfortably. None of them wanted to be the one who said no. The lock clanged, and the door cracked open. The champion bounced on his toes, smirk plastered back on, but his eyes gave away something else, a flicker, a misstep in rhythm. He masked it with bravado, throwing 3 quick shadow jabs at the air, mugging for the cameras. No rules, no scripts. You ready for real life, Grandpa? Norris didn't take the mic. His voice carried without one. No strikes. Control only. The words landed differently than the usual pre-fight banter. They weren't negotiation. They were law. The referee blinked and nodded, almost relieved to have something clear to cling to. The champion laughed, too loud, like he could drown the unease leaking into him. Control, huh? Don't worry, I'll control this whole cage. He flared his arms to the crowd. A ripple of cheers and boos collided, spinning into a roar. Norris slipped off his jacket and handed it to the official. No warm-up. No stretches. Just one roll of his shoulders, small and quiet, as if making an inventory of bones and tendons that knew their work. He stepped through the door. The cage swallowed him. The clang of it shutting behind felt like thunder cracking through the rafters. The crowd's noise swelled, then fell into an expectant hush so deep the hum of lights overhead became audible. The 2 men faced each other in the center. The champion was all twitch and energy, shoulders loose, chin tucked, hands alive. Norris stood like he had nothing to prove, hands lower than convention, head tilted slightly, eyes steady as a pendulum. The champion grinned wide, though his voice dropped when he spoke. Smile for the camera, Grandpa. Norris didn't smile. He studied him like a carpenter studies a wall before the first strike of the hammer. And then he spoke, softly, words that only the fighter in front of him could hear. Breathe. The champion's chest hitched. His exhale came quicker than intended. Ready? The ref asked, voice thin. He might as well have whispered into a storm. The champion moved first, circling sharp, tossing a slap feint that whistled through empty air. Norris didn't blink. His gaze traced hips, not hands. The audience felt the difference without knowing why. Murmurs rippled like water struck by wind. Time's ticking, the champion said, and then he lunged. A collar tie shot forward, knee lifting behind it, quick and brutal. The arena gasped. Norris wasn't there. He had shifted just enough, like a door opening an inch, and the attack slid past. The knee cut into space. The champion stumbled half a beat, and that stumble was louder than the roar that followed. Phones caught the slip. Screens lit with comments. Did you see that? Too slow. Old man's reading him. The champion shook it off, laughing, pretending it was theater. But his jaw tightened on the second laugh. He circled again, faster, snapping jabs into air. Norris moved only enough to remain centered, lines unbroken. 30 seconds left, the ref said, though nobody heard. Norris shifted his hands forward, just an inch, a suggestion of a boundary. The champion swatted at it, shoulders flaring open wider than he intended. His feet scraped on the canvas, a sound that sliced the quiet and made the whole crowd flinch. It was nothing, except it wasn't. The building felt it. The boy in the hoodie shouted he slipped, but his voice was swallowed in the thunder. The champion regrouped, grinning, angry now beneath the smile. He surged again, hips dipping, hands fast, trying to crash through the calm. Norris's palm met a wrist, his other hand brushed a triceps, and his weight shifted 1 degree. Suddenly the young man's balance tilted, not lost but threatened. The crowd roared at the scrape of feet on canvas, as if gravity itself had betrayed him. The champion yanked free, breathing harder now. The grin stayed, but too wide, too forced. Norris's voice carried again, not for the crowd, just for the man, don't chase. It sounded like advice. It felt like warning. The champion stepped forward anyway. And in that second, as heel lifted and eyes locked, the arena braced for history to write its next line. The champion charged forward like a man rehearsing his own highlight reel. He dropped levels, hands quick, reaching for a collar tie to drag the older man's head down and feed a knee through the middle. The crowd swelled with noise, phones lifted, voices rising for impact. But Norris moved with the economy of someone who had nothing to prove. He didn't block the tie. He let it close on absence. The champion's hand clutched air, and his knee rose into nothing. The miss was small, a flicker, but everyone felt it in their gut. The sound of breath sucked through teeth rolled around the arena like wind before thunder. The grin stayed fixed on the young man's face, but the timing betrayed him. He reset fast, snapped a jab at range, feinted again. Norris didn't blink. His gaze never left the hips. A half pivot of the foot, shoulders square, and the punch fell into the void. The crowd fractured, half chanting the champion's name, half pounding out "Chuck, Chuck," until the walls rattled. The cage mesh shivered from fists banging on it. The referee drifted in the corner, palms raised, trying to be visible without intruding. The champion switched tactics, smart this time. A steering wheel grip, left on the wrist, right on the back of the head, torque for a throw. He pivoted, counting on muscle memory to carry the weight. Norris turned his chin slightly, moved his stance an inch, and the wheel spun without an axle. The throw evaporated. A squeak of rubber from the champion's foot pierced the hush. In the rafters someone shouted, he slipped, but the excuse dissolved in the air. He disguised the stumble with a slap to Norris's shoulder, grinning wider, but the breath in his chest came too sharp, too fast. Norris didn't rush. He let the math hang in the young man's bones. Then he shifted, not forward, not back, but into the moment. His hands floated to the right places, one brushing near the wrist, one hovering at the triceps. The champion pressed again and felt geometry itself push back. The cage went silent, waiting for the next move. Desperate to reclaim ground, the younger fighter feinted a hard hook. Norris didn't slip it. He simply wasn't there anymore. His head left the line. His feet carried him to safety before the glove had a target. Leather brushed fabric. The laughter that followed was short, nervous, and cut off as quickly as it started. Pride pulled the champion forward. He dropped for a body lock, arms around the torso, chest to chest. This was raw force, meant to prove a point. His forearms locked, legs driving. Norris's elbows sank, hips hidden. He created a seam as thin as paper and guided the push into it. Pressure turned soft. The knot untied itself. The champion stumbled 2 steps sideways. The audience inhaled sharply, the way people do when a car misses by inches. Phones lowered. Some spectators reached for railings, steadying themselves though nothing had touched them. For a breath, the 2 men were still. Norris's right hand rested lightly against the ridge of the sternum, not a strike, but a locator. His left controlled the elbow. A twist of the waist no larger than a coin roll, and the lock melted. The young fighter's posture broke for a blink. Then came the only strike. It wasn't dramatic, not even loud. A short, vertical heel of the palm to the solar plexus, perfectly timed as the champion's lungs emptied from effort. The sound was a muted thump, but the reaction told the story. His eyes widened, his diaphragm seized, his breath vanished. He didn't collapse, but the structure of his body betrayed him. The silence that followed was heavier than the roar. Even the commentary booth held its tongue. 1,000 phones dipped, as if their owners forgot the point of recording when something real unfolded in front of them. Norris didn't follow. He let the moment breathe, let everyone witness what control looked like. The champion struggled for air, jaw clenched, smile too bright and too wide, like a mask with a crack. Finally, words broke through the tension. One commentator's voice cracked. "Did you hear that?" Norris he never finished. The arena itself erupted instead. Half screamed triumph, half disbelief, all of it thunder rolling down concrete. The champion shook his arms out, bouncing, trying to prove nothing had happened. But each breath betrayed him, deeper and rougher. He jabbed at air, searching for rhythm, but Norris's eyes didn't budge. They stayed fixed on the one line the young man had to cross. 10 seconds, the referee called, though his voice sounded distant. The champion set himself for one final surge, pride forcing his frame into motion. Norris shifted a single foot the length of a card, right hand poised, calm as if he'd known the script all along. The crowd leaned forward, thousands of bodies tilting as one, waiting for the minute to end or explode. And in that tilt, in that silence between heartbeats, the arena understood. They had underestimated the man who hadn't raised his voice once. The strike to the solar plexus had been quiet, almost polite, yet it left the champion shaken in a way a cut or bruise never could. His grin slipped, then stiffened, his chest still working to find rhythm. Around them, the crowd changed tone, roars bending into disbelief, phones jerking upward as though recording would make sense of what eyes could not. But pride doesn't fade in front of thousands. The champion rolled his shoulders, wiped sweat with a forearm, and came forward again, harder, sharper, meaner. No more half-jokes, no more feints thrown to amuse the audience. This was attack stripped down, hooks with bad intentions, knees driving straight, hips twisting like a piston. The cage felt smaller under that pressure. The chants split the room, half baying for blood, screaming, "Finish him!" The other half pounding out, "Chuck! Chuck!" until it rattled the lights. The sound wasn't applause anymore. It was thunder fighting with itself. Norris didn't match speed with speed. His steps were slight, his head movement minimal, as though he were trimming fat from each second. Hooks swished into the air by inches. Knees scraped past the line where his body had been a blink earlier. To the cameras, it almost looked lazy. To anyone watching closely, it was terrifying. Precision calm enough to erase chaos. Still, the champion's youth, his engine, made the air electric. He cornered Norris against the fence, chest rising and falling in fast bursts. Then he pounced, arms shooting inside, biceps tight against ribs. A perfect clinch, head pressed under the chin, hands locked behind the back. The optics screamed dominance. Commentators finally found their voices. "That's it. He's got him locked up. Heavy pressure here. This could be it." The crowd detonated, believing. Arms pumped in the stands. The cage mesh rattled under fists. For the first time all night, it looked like Norris had been forced to concede space. The champion dug in deeper. He muttered something into the clinch, words lost in the storm but clear in intent. "Now you feel me." His breath came ragged and hot against Norris's jawline. He squeezed harder, showing off strength for the audience and for himself. Norris didn't thrash or wrestle. His arms formed quiet frames, forearm braced against the collarbone, elbow marking the biceps line. His chin tucked. His feet didn't shuffle. He seemed almost bored, like a carpenter resting tools across what he'd measured 1,000 times. Cameras zoomed on his face, hoping for panic. They found none, only presence. But optics mattered. To half the crowd, this was victory already. Young blood locking up an old name, proving cinema couldn't live inside a cage. The chant of "Finish him" grew desperate, louder, until it sounded like a mob. Then Norris spoke. It wasn't loud. It was so soft the microphones caught only fragments. But the champion heard every syllable. Control yourself, or you'll destroy yourself. The words landed where fists hadn't. The champion's eyes flicked, not in pain, but in recognition. Rage and doubt fought for a seat inside his chest. His grip held, but his focus faltered. His breath quickened, stumbled. For a second, just a second, the certainty drained. Norris didn't break the hold. He rearranged it. His right hand slid to the inside of the wrist. His left forearm shifted higher against the biceps. His hips turned no more than a coin's width. The clinch, which seconds earlier had looked unbreakable, found air between its seams. Pressure drained like water down a crack. The champion's hands discovered space they hadn't left. The crowd sensed it before they saw it. The roar didn't fade. It thinned, sharpened, as though thousands of bodies leaned forward together to catch something fragile. The champion jerked, trying to double down, trying to mask the wobble with raw force. He drove his shoulder in, attempted a snap down. Norris's crown dipped away. He switched to a body lock. Norris's frame became a shelf, shunting the drive into the fence with a hollow buzz. Every correction found absence. Still, the picture looked like advantage. Cameras caught muscles straining, sweat flying. The younger man wrapped around the older. From a distance it played like control. But those close enough saw the truth. Norris hadn't been controlled at all. He'd been teaching. The champion, embarrassed by how long the dominance dragged without progress, reset his feet for a lift. He wanted a slam, something spectacular, something that would erase the hesitation on his face. His jaw clenched so hard the muscle popped at the angle. Norris's voice cut through again, low, steady. This isn't about strength. It's about who breaks first. The words sank deeper than the palm strike had. The champion's arms, still locked, trembled, not from effort, but from doubt threading through muscle. His breath caught. His grip loosened by instinct. That was enough. Norris stepped half a pace, rotated his hips, and the cage stopped vibrating. Suddenly the young man's arms were holding nothing. The lock melted, his body stumbling into space that hadn't existed seconds before. The arena gasped as one. Thousands of lungs emptied at once. The sound was stranger than a roar. It was silence with teeth. And just as the champion tried to charge back in, face set with fury, the entire building leaned forward to see what would happen when pride sprinted headlong into patience. The cage felt like it had shrunk after the clinch. The champion stood breathing hard, guard high but trembling at the edges, a grin plastered over his face that fooled no one. The crowd sensed the shift. Their roar didn't return. Instead, a hush fell, the kind that makes every scrape of a shoe echo like thunder. Norris didn't move forward. He let the silence work. He knew the pause could be heavier than any strike. The referee hovered, palms out, while on the big screen's chat feed scrolled. He slipped. Norris is stalling. Watch the cardio. None of it mattered inside the cage, where reality moved slower, sharper. The champion circled, trying to rebuild control. He lashed out with a kick to the calf, hard and loud. Norris lifted his leg a fraction, set it back down, balanced as if nothing had touched him. Another kick. Another shift. Calm precision against brute force. The audience split down the middle. Some screamed for violence. Finish him. Others chanted his name in a rhythm that felt like drumming on bone. Chuck. Chuck. The arena itself became the third fighter, louder with each heartbeat. The champion snapped a jab, then another, then drove forward to trap Norris by the fence. For a moment, the image looked right again, young power pressing the older man. But Norris stepped in, set his forearm, palm, hip, everything in its proper place. His voice was soft, nearly lost under the noise. Control yourself, or you'll destroy yourself. The words cut deeper than any strike. The champion blinked. Rage shoved doubt aside, but the stutter in his breath betrayed him. The crowd didn't hear the words, but they felt the hesitation ripple through the cage. He clinched again, shoving hard, but the lock fell apart like water in his hands. Norris guided him away, not fighting so much as steering. Closed seats saw it clearly, an education, not a struggle. Further back, the confusion turned to awe. The champion laughed too loud, shadowboxed between them, pretending confidence. His chest rose too quickly, breaths out of sync. Then came a kick, brutal to the shin. Norris turned, bone on bone cracking like dry wood. The grin faltered for half a second, long enough for cameras to catch. A jab followed. Norris didn't parry, just touched the glove on its return. The sound of a shoe dragging against canvas sliced through the quiet. The arena froze again, like a single body holding its breath. Step by step, Norris narrowed the options. Each pivot closed a door, each pause opened another, and the young man found himself funneled into a hallway with only one way out. Forward. Pride demanded he take it. Breathe, Norris said again, and this time it landed like an insult. The hook came hard, sharp, professional. Norris slipped past it, eyes fixed on his opponents, delivering the message without words. I don't need to hit you. I already own the moment. The silence grew heavier than the noise had ever been. The chance collapsed. People leaned forward, hands clutching railings, waiting. Then Norris stepped back, his first retreat. The champion seized it. He squared his stance, lowered his weight, loading up everything. Youth, speed, ego, into one desperate rush. The arena tilted forward with him. A woman whispered a prayer. A boy in a replica hoodie forgot his phone. Even the commentators stuttered, voices dropping into awe. Norris raised one open palm, steady, the other hand near centerline, his eyes calm. Not anger, not pity. Certainty. The champion drew a final breath, harsh and scraping, then launched forward with everything he had. And in that heartbeat, the cage became weightless, the air too thin, the silence louder than any roar. Norris shifted, not much, just enough. He was ready to turn fury into emptiness, to show that control beats chaos, that discipline swallows pride. The collision had not yet landed, but everyone in the building knew the lesson was already written. The champion charged like a storm with no brakes. Every ounce of youth and fury poured into the rush. The cage rattled as if it might split. For half a second, the whole arena leaned forward, convinced this was the strike that would erase doubt. But Norris shifted. A half step, a tilt of the shoulder, a palm guiding the wrist aside as gently as closing a door. The force passed into emptiness. A small reap at the ankle, hips turning with a fraction of weight, and the young fighter's body betrayed him. One heartbeat, he was attacking. The next, he was kneeling on the canvas, balance stolen, pride collapsing faster than his stance. The fall wasn't brutal. Norris eased him down, a hand steadying the descent. There was no humiliation, no crash, only inevitability. That was the lesson. Power redirected is heavier than power spent. Silence detonated. Tens of thousands of throats held their sound at once. The air itself felt suspended. Then, as if released from a dam, the roar came back, wild, confused, thunderous. Some shouted triumph, others disbelief. But nobody stayed still. Phones shook in unsteady hands. Commentators lost words mid-sentence. The arena had seen something it couldn't quite name. Norris had already stepped back, hands low, gaze calm. He didn't pose, didn't celebrate. He simply waited, allowing space for the younger man to rise. The champion's breath tore in his chest, each inhale a struggle against silence. He found the fence, used it to push himself upright, eyes wide but no longer mocking. Take your time, Norris said, just for him. The crowd quieted again, straining to catch anything that passed between them. The referee stayed ready but unneeded. Slowly, the champion straightened, the bravado gone. He saw in front of him not an opponent, not an actor from old films, but a mirror of what discipline looked like when stripped of spectacle. Norris's eyes held him steady. Breathe, he said once more, not command, not correction, but release. The words struck harder than any punch. The young man's shoulders dropped. The fight was technically still live, but the battle had ended. He nodded, small, almost private, and extended a glove. The gesture wavered, but it was real. Norris accepted it with a single touch, brief and unceremonious. I hear you, the champion muttered, voice raw, carrying in the hush. There was no surrender, only recognition. It was enough. Applause began scattered, then grew, rolling through the arena until it was a tide of hands striking together. Not the chant of earlier, not bloodlust, but something closer to gratitude. Strangers embraced. Others wept openly. For once, victory meant less than the dignity with which it was handled. The champion lowered his head, brushed his glove against his chest, then turned to leave. The crowd opened a lane for him. No jeers followed. Some even reached out to tap his shoulder. He walked away changed, his face stripped bare of the performance he'd carried in. Norris left without flourish. He shook off the microphone an official tried to hand him, slipped on his jacket, adjusted the cuff. The crowd roared his name again, but he gave only the smallest lift of a hand in thanks. He glanced once at the cage, the place where ego had burned out and respect had been born, then stepped calmly into the tunnel. The last image the cameras caught was not of triumph, but of character, a man walking away without needing a headline, leaving behind a space quieter, heavier, and somehow cleaner than before. That night, the fight wasn't about youth or age, fame or legacy. It wasn't even about who won. It was about what remains when the noise dies and the lights dim, the discipline to stay calm when chaos screams, and the respect that turns combat into something unforgettable.